What's going on, everybody? This is Moose and Brian here from OccupyFantasy.com at OccupyFantasy on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. I am your host, Moose, at CFB_Moose on Twitter is where you can find me. The co-founder and data guru here at OccupyFantasy.com. Alongside Brian, at BrianJesterFF on Twitter. He is the co-founder and CEO of Occupy Fantasy. How's it going, Brian?
Moose, feels like we've been doing these videos at a different time frame every single Saturday. So glad for anyone who can join us live and hopefully still provide some good info for people who tune in after the fact.
Definitely. It was the, I guess, fiance's brother. I guess is that brother-in-law? I guess. I don't know what that is.
Close enough.
Yeah. It was his birthday. He's turning 10. So they got a video game truck. All his friends just absolutely crushed me in FIFA, Smash Brothers, Fortnite. And I'm just sitting there like,
Moose, you're
right,
lost.
well,
You got no chance. You got no chance in video games against Gen Z.
I mean, anytime like they scored a goal on me and then they did the Fortnite dance and it was like I was like, man, I was wanted to punch them, but but we're not here to talk about tilting on video games. We're here to talk about tilting on NFL. Let's go ahead and break down some NFL, your questions, top stacks, top plays, all that good stuff in the mix. We're here for about 30 minutes or so to go ahead and break it down. I see we have Dot Bets in the chat. He is up like 8 units or so on the video plays. Make sure you go ahead and check out his video here on our channel at Occupy Fantasy. Doing some great work over there with betting. But let's take a look, Brian, from a high-level standpoint here. What do you feel about the slate? Because my first thought was very icky in the sense that a lot of expensive stacks, very hard to get what you want, and you have to be a little creative to make some lineups this week.
I think creative is the best way to describe it. Yeah, you have to be really creative this week because some of the traditional stacks that look great, and there are some high totals, right? We have a couple games over 50 points and some high ceiling plays, but there are a lot of warts with most of the game stacks. Pricing is a big factor for some of the best ones. And no true value plays. Yeah, I guess on DraftKings we have some guys that are underpriced like we normally do. FanDuel, not that much. It's actually a little bit harder to build on FanDuel this week. And for that reason, I think we're going to have an in-depth stack discussion here because as we talked about on Tuesday, the $1 Million Mission, we got to play the running backs that are sub 10%. We got to play the ones that are high in the model. And all those ones this week are pretty expensive. So if those are the guys that we're going to prioritize, and I think those are the guys that we rightfully should prioritize, then we have to reconsider the stack situation, which I don't even think is that bad of an idea, Moose, because it's not like stacks have been that integral in winning in NFL DFS so far this year.
Yeah, you've pretty much hit it on the head where we've had to make some modified stacks, 2x1s, 2x0s, even naked quarterbacks in some sense. So let's jump into it. What you see on screen here is the Occupy Fantasy Daily Plug, which you can check at OccupyFantasy.com. I'm going to scroll down to the stack section, and Chris, our NFL writer, writes up 3 or so game stacks and talks about them. But the first one we're going to talk about here, Brian, Jacksonville and Detroit. What's your thoughts on that game?
I honestly think it's the best stack, which is the craziest thing you could possibly say on such a large slate. But it looks really good. High total. This is one of the games with the high totals. You have, especially on Jacksonville's side, you have really clear targets. So many different ways you can stack it up with Christian Kirk, Zay Jones, Marvin Jones, Evan Ingram, even ETN out of the backfield if you want. Running back with Amon-Ra St. Brown or Jamal Williams. DeAndre Swift is looking healthier and healthier. I think in practice this week they said it's the healthiest he's looked. His snaps and his route involvement indicated as much last week. Finally got a bit of a bump there. So he's in play here as well. I just got news about 30 minutes ago that rookie Jameson Williams will be activated. He was a first-round pick, explosive at Alabama. But he's going to be eased back in. But if you're playing Jared Goff, honestly, just 5 to 10 plays with Jameson Williams raises his floor and ceiling a bit too, just because of how explosive he is. So I think the biggest thing, though, Moose, is the affordability of all of these pieces, especially on DraftKings, but on both sites as well. Everybody in this game is extremely affordable, which is a luxury that we don't have in many places this week.
Yeah, it's very tough. And as I'm looking here in the running back model, like you said, we have overall some pretty expensive plays, good plays across. So you're going to have to find a cheap piece somewhere, whether that's a Curtis Samuel piece, a cheap stack, or a Curtis Samuel piece within the cheap stack to to help fit it in. So I don't mind it. They're like third or fourth on my ranking, so I don't hate that play at all.
Yeah, and I'll say this. So a lot of times what I like to do is run our lineup builder for all sports, right? We talk about this, right? But one of the greatest features is just to run it with just a limited set of rules, not put any exposures in, just to see what it's spitting out, right? So I built a bunch of 2-1 stacks, a bunch of 3-1 stacks, no trash players involved. Don't pair any running backs or quarterbacks. Like just very, very basic rules, right? And literally like the top half of lineups were cheap quarterbacks. Most were from this game, Jacksonville, Detroit. There are a couple other games featured, but all the expensive stacks, Kansas City, Cincinnati, Las Vegas, the Chargers. If you want to consider some of the other stacks that we don't even have listed here, like Jalen Hurts, Justin Fields, like those guys, not even in the top half of the model because of what we talked about, how tough it is. And this is on both sides. So generally the model leads us to the promised land, and doing these types of exercises is really helpful. So that kind of shifted my perspective a bit, most because like the plug, like Chris, I was high on these other stacks all week. They pop in most rankings, but when it comes to practice and putting into play, it's really tough to execute.
Which you make a really good point, and it's so valuable whether you use our lineup builder, you hand build, or whatever anywhere in between, is to take some time and build. Where it may take you 5 minutes on one Saturday or Sunday, it might take you 3 hours on another Saturday, but you have to fool around, see what can be done, and go from there, which I really like. Brian, I do that, and I kind of get an idea of what I like, and then because I've seen so many players, so many combinations, I'll usually take a break, and let's say I'm building Jacksonville stacks or whatnot, and I want to hand build one, and I run it, I see kind of what can come through, I'll take a step back, maybe watch some TV, take the dog out for a walk, whatever, get my eyes away from it, and start anew with the idea that I'm going in with Jacksonville. I already know I'm going that Jacksonville route, but just so I'm not clogged by potentially what I might see on a random lineup, I'm not phased by it. I have a clearer mind on making lineups.
Yeah, I like that, and that's kind of what I've been doing too. Just today, just do that a little bit, go build some MMA lineups, eat some lunch, take a shower, come back, build again. So I'll start building again here after the show. But yeah, I agree with that. It's a great it's a great move to break it up.
Definitely, and as Matt says here, you can bring it back with cover boy Amon-Ra St. Brown. An ETN, a different lineup in case touchdowns flow through him. He says, what's your thoughts on Jets and Vikings for stacking, particularly the Jets? We'll talk about this next, Brian, when you sent me the several eye emojis when I was getting the model up this week, and I said, Mike White's my favorite quarterback. And you're like, no, get out of here. It still holds true. He is my personal ranking stack with the Jets. I'm curious to get your thoughts on that game.
Yeah, this is the other game. When you run the builder and you include all the quarterbacks, this is the game that pops up the most in addition to Jacksonville and Detroit on both sides. Kirk Cousins stacks, which Chris has written here in Minnesota, but Jet stack as well. And the reason is the pricing. The reason is this game environment, decent total, 45 points. Minnesota is still down their top two, left cornerbacks or right, opposite of Patrick Peterson. The other two guys are still out. So it's Patrick Peterson and then a third string corner on this side. So you can rightfully take advantage of that. And you have Garrett Wilson, who's just dumb cheap on DraftKings. We have cheap running backs. Zonovan Knight, I think, will be relatively popular on DraftKings after he came out of nowhere and was active last week and performed pretty well. So, yeah, I think you have to like this stack. It checks a lot of boxes for me as well. And, yeah, I mean, because you can go the tight end, Tyler Conklin. If you want to play another Jets receiver in addition to Wilson, you can. Lots of different ways you can go, so lots of flexibility. And, yeah, it's gross when you consider that Goff and Lawrence and Mike White and Kirk Cousins are some of the top options price considered this week. Goes to show what kind of slate we're working with.
Yeah, and Garrett Wilson's going to be 21% owned projected in our side for DraftKings. And, of course, he's going to, if we play him, he's probably not going to score 3 touchdowns like he always does. He's high owned.
I mean, just insane pricing for Garrett Wilson this week. So
it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. But yeah, we'll talk about the next stack that's written up here in the plug. Kansas City at Cincinnati. Brian, you know I'm one of the biggest Cincinnati fans in the world. And I know when they're in good spots to play and bad spots to play, I don't like the I like them. They're so hard to fit, though. It's so hard to make these stacks work.
They're dumb expensive. It's crazy, right? Like I went in today just trying to build these stacks. Like, let's put in the stacks, run the builder, just start building my lineups. I very quickly realized that this is really hard to do.
Yeah.
The pricing is outrageous for both these teams. And what makes it super difficult, despite having a high total, is that, and I know we just talked about it as recently as Tuesday, that I'm not going to miss out on a Joe Burrow explosion because they win so many GPPs. But it's just really tough this week with the pricing. Even if he throws for like 4 touchdowns, it's going to be hard for him to be in the optimal lineup in a stack. Now maybe he's naked or just one off, and that's kind of tough. But you also have to consider that this is Chase's first game back, and we expect him to be fine, but he was still on crutches as of like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
So how much in-game shape can he really be? And if he's anything below 100%, that really fucks up the game stacks, especially at his price. If he plays enough to mess up Higgins and Boyd, but he doesn't play enough to reach his true ceiling, that makes it tough. And on Kansas City side, they spread the ball around so much outside of Kelsey that it's really tough to nail it down on who you're going to stack. Even in 150 max, right? Like, I'm trying to, all right, we could play Justin Watson. We could play Sky Moore. We can play Valdez-Scantling, like Pacheco. It's like, all right, that's still like 6 guys when you include Juju and Kelsey. It's like, how the hell do you narrow it down? So I think the best way moves is just, despite what we've written up here, I think it's tough to play, man. If you were again 150 max, I think you can do it.
Yeah.
If you want to take on that risk. Anything else, I don't think you can play it just based on the pricing.
I mean, it's weird when you go to the wide receiver model and you see that Higgins is above Chase. Like, normally Chase is significantly higher than T. Higgins. That worries me a little bit. Normally, any wide receiver from the Bengals is going to be higher up. Plus, we don't know the status of Joe Mixon.
True too.
I mean, he's concussed for like 3 weeks or whatnot. If he plays, how healthy will he be as well? So, a lot of question marks that kind of scare me off of that. Could you sprinkle some of those players in as a one-off? Yeah, I don't hate that.
I just prefer that. I would just, because again, if you try to stack it, you just sacrifice, like, literally go build a lineup, whether build or hand build, and you 2-1 stack. Even if you 2-1 stack, like Dot Bet says, like Mahomes, Kelsey, Higgins, like, you have to sacrifice at least 2 spots in your lineup. And we've just seen that, especially this year, that really hasn't worked out that much when you're sacrificing that much in a lineup. So, yeah, despite all this being said, I guess if I had to rank them, Moose, right? Because I know we got the question in Discord earlier. If you're playing Kansas City sides, Travis Kelce #1 by a massive difference.
Yes.
Here's the other thing that I'm concerned about. Juju, I know it was a blowout last week, but he only played like 30% of the snaps or something in his first week back from his concussion. So I don't know if that was game plan specific, blowout related. I really don't know. Justin Watson ran the most routes. Valdez-Scantling was in there. Sky Moore played the most snaps he's played all year. So it's kind of like the Patriots receiver situation where it's like, I don't know what the fuck's going on. So, like, I don't even know how to predict who to play here. And just makes it really tough.
Yeah, if I had to rank them, like you said, probably Juju and MVS tied for first. Maybe Juju gets it a little bit. But, yeah.
Do you feel confident at all? Like, I don't
necessarily know. However, here's a galaxy brain. Let's take a quick galaxy brain. If we're thinking like this, other people are probably thinking about this. It's well known. Could you make the case that, hey, let me go and try? Again, we talked about it before. If there's a reason why you like a stack, we're not going to tell you not to play it.
Sure.
But if there's a way, if you're like, hey, I really like Juju, I think he's going to get the most snaps or whatever, 2-0, 2-1, whatever, and maybe you get leverage that way. That's also a possibility.
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't mind that, but I think the field is probably just going to 2-1 stack this game.
Mm-hmm.
I think we got Juju 6% projected ownership. Kelsey is, what's he at? He's tough to fit in this week too. He's crazy expensive. He's only 12%. So I get it. I think I'd just rather one off everyone in this game and hope I get a game stack around it.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. So we got some questions here. Lord King says, I'm going back to Mike White and filling out the mid-range everywhere with one pay-up running back. Running back with C.J. Hockenson because I think they take away Jefferson and he won't hit value. Definitely.
I mean, Jefferson's expensive too. Mm-hmm. I get it. But yeah, that's a great idea for a stack. That's the perfect type of stack this week. Will it work out? We'll find out 7 p.m. Sunday. But to me, that seems like the right approach this week.
And he also says, I'm completely gagging Mahomes or fading Mahomes because there's too much mid-range value that you won't be able to get even if you 2 versus 1 stack. Yeah, exactly.
I agree. I didn't know what gagging meant. I'm glad it was a typo because I was like, I don't know what that slang means.
Zachary says Jamal Williams or Kyle White for a full PPR.
Yeah, so this is I assume season long, and let's just talk about it for a second because Tampa Bay is the Monday night game, and Leonard Fournette officially questionable, but sounds like he will play. But we heard all the rumblings before last week, even or 2 weeks ago, most that they were looking to get Rachaad White more touches over Leonard Fournette. I guess the key here is, can you predict whether or not Jamal Williams will have 3 one-yard touchdowns this week? But we do like that game environment, so I guess you have to start Jamal Williams. He's a little bit safer. If I was an underdog, I'd probably start Rachaad White, though.
Okay, cool. Good question here from Dot Bets. Are you guys trusting the Cleveland stacks for high-risk GPPs? As you see in the note here in blue, our model is high on Deshaun Watson. You can consider him with Cooper, DPJ, and or Brian the tight end, and a bunch of other stuff, even bringing it back. Chris says it's lower on his personal list than the other stacks he listed, but I'm curious to get your thoughts, Brian.
Yes, this is the fifth game or the fifth stack that pops up in the builder. Obviously, since he's number one, it makes sense, right? But like, this is easier to fit. Cooper, DPJ, Bryant especially, all very affordable. Nico Collins, now the wide receiver one with Brandon Cooks out this week, all extremely, extremely affordable. So, yeah, can we trust it? No. But can we trust Goff and Lawrence and Cousins and Mike White? No. Like, we can't trust many of these games. The only ones we can trust are Mahomes and Burrow and even like Herbert. But we've already talked about why, that's difficult to do this week. So we're playing GPPs, right? We have to throw faith in these guys. Can we trust them? No. Am I going to play them? Yes.
Real quick, Zachary says he has his perfect season on the line, so he's going for ceiling. He's a 2-point favorite. Does Jamal Williams hold for you?
That's tough, man. I think if you just look at just raw projections, Jamal Williams is rated higher. So I think you got to play Jamal.
Tito Fuentes says, should I trade Amari Cooper and Goff for B-Rob and Mike Will?
Anytime you're trading a quarterback, especially one of Goff's caliber, to get 2 position players, I'd probably do it.
Okay.
So yes.
Cool. Let's see here. Another question here from Mark. It says, should I trade James Williams for Samaje Perine? I have Mixon. Don't need to win this week, but would like handcuff for playoffs.
Sure you can, but I just don't understand why you would hold Jameson Williams for 12 weeks and then drop him the week he comes back, or trade him the week he comes back. So I get it. I get the safety. If that's very important to you, you can certainly do it. Just don't be devastated when Jameson Williams beats you in the playoffs.
Yeah, a lot of people. Not saying Mark doesn't know this. I'm just saying it's the thing that isn't really talked about a lot with season long is like just holding players. Even though if you're not going to use them, it's kind of, I can't remember what the actual thing is called, but like you have it so no one else can use it against you.
Oh yeah, I mean I know because our other co-founder Waleed, he plays a ton of high stakes season long, and he was talking about holding on to who was Treylon Burks and Christian Watson and some of these guys that are having better second half of the year. We know typically rookies perform better in the second half, which can translate to DFS too, right? If a rookie hasn't done much, but you have a feeling on them and they're trending up a little bit and their ownership and price hasn't caught up yet, you can certainly play them. And Jameson Williams qualifies as a guy who we've been holding, and he was a first-round pick for a reason out of Alabama, just probably their best receiver last year. So there's a non-zero chance that he's a factor come fantasy playoffs.
Definitely, yes. And also if you need to, season-long tip is keep an eye on who you're playing next week. So when waivers open up, keep an eye on who they might need for next week and scoop them up first.
Exactly.
Yeah, definitely. So the last stack we'll talk about here that's written up in the plug that you like, Brian, but you did say that there's some problems, the Raiders and the Chargers. I'm curious to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, the first problem is Eckler and Jacobs is probably combined for 50 points and the stack fails. But the other reason that it probably fails is the Chargers are surprisingly down 2 offensive linemen. Right tackle Trey Pipkins and most importantly their center Corey Linsley are both out. Not a big fan when multiple offensive linemen are out. And honestly, the Dolphins and 49ers game, I think people could stack this week, but they're probably out both of their tackles. Austin Jackson got injured last week, their right tackle. He is out. And Teron Armstead, who's one of the best offensive linemen, has been dealing with injuries all year, but he hurt himself even more this past week He's doubtful to play. So you're missing your two offensive tackles against one of the best defenses in the league with a ferocious pass rush. And I think I saw someone comment on DotBet's video that sharps are on 49ers this week, and that makes a ton of sense. So, I mean, Dolphins stacks are in play every single week. This week it just feels bad. And the Chargers stack too. The Chargers stack low-key is just as expensive as the Bengals stack. Like if you look at combined salary, like that's also really tough to fit. So, yeah, again, I get it. And from a raw perspective, if you find some other cheap plays you really like, you can play it. But I think it really sacrifices both the floor and ceiling of your entire line if you try to stack these really expensive teams this week.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, I mean, it's basically, I think that's the whole thing is how do you deal with the expensive stacks? Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's the ultimate key this week because we haven't. It's just it's tough, man. It's really tough because obviously those have the highest ceilings, but we're not just playing a 4-man lineup. We're not playing Rainmakers, right? We're just putting in the highest performers from a game. So it's difficult, and it takes a lot of fortitude to not play these guys, especially when they have 40-point ceilings. But I really do, after playing around with the builder for a long time this morning, I think it's the right approach this week. Because we mentioned at the top of the show most, but we haven't really talked about the running backs yet and why that just amplifies this further.
Yeah, exactly. We can talk about to that next. Do you want me to bring up the wide receiver model? We can even just show it that way.
Yeah, the running back model, you mean?
Yeah, that's what I said, right?
No, you said receivers, but we know you meant running backs, so.
That's what I meant to say. Yeah, so let me go ahead and pull that up here.
Especially on FanDuel, because I was looking at, Nick Chubb is 3% owned this week, projected on FanDuel, because he's like 9,600 or something outrageous.
Mm-hmm.
But against Houston, there's a real chance he goes for like 150 and 2 and leads at Slate in scoring. So, I mean, his price is unbelievably expensive. That's the reason he's 3%. But if he's the highest score and he's the guy we need and he's 3% owned, that's how we win GPPs.
Exactly. Yep. You pretty much hit that on the head there. So I have the model up here. Take a look. It's originally sorted by DraftKings, our DraftKings OF index. Walker, Etienne, Jacobs, Cook. All these people are 7, 8K higher. So you get some expensive running backs at the top. Very tough to fit those in with the expensive stacks.
You just can't do it. You got to sacrifice one or the other. And I am not sacrificing for the 12th week in a row, 13th week in a row, the top running back in the model to fit in a stack that's going to fail anyways. Yeah. So Kenneth Walker, number one, is facing a Rams defense that is without Aaron Donald, a team that's already given up. Aaron Donald's not playing this week. Mm-hmm. So Walker could run wild. I love, speaking of prop betting, I love his alternate rushing yards props, his multiple touchdown props. If you can find who leads the Sunday games in rushing yards, I like Kenneth Walker as well. I mean, again, he's most 13 to 15%. He's not even outrageously owned.
Yeah, and 7,000, so not too expensive. I mean, it's still expensive, but yeah, and the ridiculous. Anytime you see the triple-digit OF index score for Yahoo, it's a good play.
Exactly, it's always crazy to see. So, but yeah, like you said, Moose, right? Look at these other guys. If you remember past weeks, we've had mid, even low to mid to high range 5K running backs that were very plausible. And this week it's like, okay, we got Pacheco, who doesn't really catch passes. We got Cordero Patterson, who I do like this week. But beyond that, right, like no one else. The most interesting name, Moose, I think will probably go owned based on his price and everyone trying to fit in those stacks is Zonovan Knight, who's down there at 4,600 on DraftKings. Michael Carter was ruled out on Friday. He leapfrogged James Robinson last week in the pecking order and looked good doing it. Like, for those who watched the game, he looked damn good in what he did. So I get it. But we're also going off a one-game sample here. And they've been known to screw around with their running back rotations. And they're in the playoff hunt. So who's to say that Ty Johnson or even James Robinson won't get touches over him this week? It's a very realistic chance that three-headed backfield committee. And again, the model's not on it. If he was top 5, top 10, I'd be on it. But most generally when a guy is that low and picking up some ownership and he's cheap, it still generally doesn't pan out when he's that low in the model.
Yeah, exactly. Now, if he was, like you said, if he was in like second, third, fourth, even top 10, I would consider it. But the model's too sharp to find that. As I say that, he'll go for 3 touchdowns.
He's not number one. All I know is, dude, we're playing Kenneth Walker. If he fails, he fails. But I'm like the Joe Burrow, even though I'm immediately going back and not playing Joe Burrow this week. We're not missing out on Kenneth Walker's explosion game.
And Dotbez says Walker is 14-1 to get the most rushing yards on Sunday on DraftKings.
Dude, there you go. So who's favorite? I think it's probably Chubb and then maybe Jacobs after he ran for like 400 yards last week. They're probably the favorites. But dude, 14-1 on Walker, who is known to break off 80-yard runs at any time against a defense without Aaron Donald as a 7-point favorite. Dude, you got to get it 14-1. I love that.
Yeah, definitely. Jason says, explain please. Not sure what you want us to explain, but if you could let us know, we'll definitely explain it. And,
yeah, let us know.
Yeah, that's pretty much all the questions. So we can, he says Chubb favorite is 650, Jacobs second at 750.
Yeah, so we get double those odds. Walker. Let's get this screenshot. Let's get this clipped because Walker 14-1. I might have to go make a bet here after now that's legal in Maryland. I might have to go make a bet here and bankrupt DraftKings with a little Walker action. I do like that this week.
Yeah, that is actually a really good bet. I do like that. I wonder if you could throw some single game parlays in there, get them like to do alternate rushing yards to score 2 touchdowns, 2+ touchdowns. That'd be pretty good to hit there.
It pays even money.
Pretty much, yep. So the last thing we talk about on the show, as long as there's no more questions, I'll bring up the wide receiver model here, and we take a look at some cheap, low-owned plays that can go ahead and get a touchdown. So we're going to go ahead and filter out to be 10% or less, and $5,000 on DraftKings. And
here's the other thing, as you're doing this really quickly, as you did the 10% filter, we got Tyreek and Justin Jefferson and AJ Brown all sub 10% because of the other pricing this week.
Yeah, let me go back and pull that up here. So
come on, man.
Look here.
This is the clearest path to victory this week, right? And when we can play these, look, Tyreek 8%, J2 9%, AJ Brown 5%, Waddle 3%, Keenan not like. Come on, dude, we got to play these guys.
Yeah, your boy Christian Watson, 10%.
Which we didn't even talk about really quickly. I will say this: my gross stack of the week is Aaron Rodgers to Lazard, double stack with Christian Watson. I told you, Moose, right before the show, if there's a week that Rodgers is actually going to care, it's this week against the Bears, who he hates with a passion. And after Jordan Love came in and looked decent in relief last week, Rodgers is still going to say, hey, I'm still the guy here. Come out and throw. Chicago missing 2 DBs. That's my gross stack of the week.
The thing is, I actually don't hate it. I mean, yeah, you gave some pretty good explanations, and all you need is three targets for Christian Watson to hit value because he's going to
3 targets, 3 touchdowns. Yeah, who cares?
But yeah, so we have 5,000 or less. Brian, is it cheating to say? I know he's at 10% on DraftKings. DPJ, the model has Cleveland as the number 1 quarterback. Throw it back with Donovan Peoples-Jones. I think he can get there.
I don't think it's cheating. I probably would have taken it if you didn't take it. So
yeah, see,
DPJ.
I went first this time because normally you go first.
Ugh, I know you cheated on that one. Okay. I will go. And there's a reason he's 2% owned. But I'll go Robert Woods, who is an underperforming wide receiver this week. Expected to score way more points than he has this year. And if you played him at all in any sort of format, you know that he has not performed. So, again, 2% owned. You can pair him up with Devonta Smith, who is also an underperforming wide receiver in the same game, a little mini stack there. I'd like stacking that game a little bit too. So yeah, Robert Woods is my call here, most 2%, who I don't expect anyone to play.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I love that. So Donovan Peoples-Jones and Robert Woods. Yeah, sorry. I was looking at. I had it unfiltered on the other screen. I was like, where did he go? Yeah. And really quick, let's just talk about, because I know it's been brought up before. Let's take a look at tight ends from a high level, defense from a high level, and then we'll go ahead and we'll close it out. So going ahead and bringing up the tight end model here. We talked about Kelsey, clear number 1 in Kansas City, and he's the most expensive tight end by like $4,000, which is like actually not a joke. 12%. It's actually Freiermuth is more popular, saving with a bunch of savings. He's 4,300. So with Kelsey, I mean, if you're playing such a cheap stack, do you think you try and fit in Kelsey, or there's so many other options that save you $2,000-$3,000 that it might not be worth it?
Yeah, it's the ultimate question, because if Kelsey goes for 30 fantasy points, no other tight ends coming close probably, unless aside from Mark Andrews, but he's expensive as well. So yeah, that's the key here. You're playing 150, you're going to get him in there for sure, but a single entry, I think I'd prefer to just punt it, especially on DraftKings. FanDuel a little more manageable, just given the way the pricing set up. But I single lineup or small field stuff, I think I prefer to play a cheaper guy.
Makes sense. Dot says, if you're stacking the jet side, Conklin or Moore?
I still don't think they trust Moore, especially with Corey Davis back. So give me Conklin, especially it satisfies a shitty position. Tight end, he's only 3,100 DraftKings, 5K on FanDuel. Saved a lot of salary. So yeah, I'll say Conklin. Well, yeah, of course with Garrett Wilson too.
Yeah, of course, yeah. And then we'll hop over to the defense. And if you have any more last questions, now's the time to get them in before we close out the show. But if we pull up defense here, Baltimore leads our model, number one. 4K on DraftKings, 4,500 on FanDuel. Minnesota, Seattle, even the Bengals are up there as well. Any thoughts on some of these defenses toward the top, or is there any ones that you like that's more toward the bottom? Kind of curious to get your thoughts.
I think another reason here, Moose, is especially on FanDuel too, Kansas City's defense is only 3,800. Cincinnati's defense is mad cheap on both sites. That's literally its minimum price on FanDuel. So that's another reason to avoid that game. The model's picking up on something, likely just the sheer passing volume from both sides, the aggressive throw percentage from both sides. You can play a cheap defense against popular quarterbacks or against popular stacks. So another reason to fade that game. So that was the first thing I noticed, though.
Yeah, when I saw Cincinnati, I'm like, they probably shouldn't be min-price. And
No, dude,
if they are min-price, you can still get away with we talk about this all the time, where if you have some salary savings, you can have them score 2-4 points and use that other 1,000 to upgrade another position, and that can still get you, if that extra position gets you 5-10 points, that still helps you out. So I don't hate it. And if you get an interception, somehow miraculous touchdown return back from a defense, you're looking really good.
Yeah, and I would say people might wonder why they rank higher than Pittsburgh in this particular sense. Pittsburgh's the highest projected owned defense on the slate. But you got to figure, how many fantasy points can they truly get when they're facing an offense that runs 90% of the time? Not exactly 90, but right? Where Cincinnati's going to be facing passes pretty much every single play. That's more opportunity for fantasy points. It's harder for Pittsburgh to rack up fantasy points when they're just running every single play. So that's a big reason for it. The model picks up on that. And to me, it's an easy pivot. Unlike some of those weeks where we get a $2,400 defense against a bad quarterback that I would have to pass, that's not necessarily the case this time around with Pittsburgh. So I'm much more willing to fade them, especially on DraftKings.
Yeah, I'm exactly there. So that'll pretty much do it for tonight's show. Brian, is there any last lingering thoughts or questions or anything else you want to talk about before I take us out?
I would say check out Chris's video to get a different perspective. Read the Daily Plug. Excuse me, Chris's video is here on YouTube. He'll have the live Q&A tomorrow morning, so make sure you check that out in our Discord channel. And I think that's it. Biggest takeaway, Moose, is play around with the builder, see what's possible, and test your theories. And I do it for every sport, and it was ultra important this week.
Yes, exactly. So, that'll pretty much do it for tonight's show. If you have any more questions, occupyfantasy.com/discord. Find out how you can get access to our Discord server. Twitter, Instagram, all that good stuff as well is open. Chris will be in our Discord doing a live Q&A at 11 o'clock a.m. Eastern Time tomorrow before the games. And then Tuesday, we'll go ahead and recap Brian's 150 max lineups on DraftKings and FanDuel. And then we'll be back all again a week from today talking about NFL. Until next time, Moose and Brian from Occupy Fantasy. Have a good night.